there was one renowned singer who was preaching who told us we was looking like a bunch of dummies. Remember? A certain singer, I'll say off of this.
I don't know
And
what you're
she's
talking
like,
about.
and they was sitting there looking like a bunch of dummies.
Oh
Like some of y'all
yeah,
out there,
yeah.
something like that. We're like, oh.
Oh yeah, I do
We're like,
remember that.
Oh, y'all got to tell me afterwards. Is somebody
Yeah,
out there?
you.
oh yeah,
No,
No.
yeah,
you might know the singer.
you think you know?
Oh, he knows the singer. Like, is he gonna pick
Well,
up?
tell me, I'll bleep it out.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You remember?
Yeah.
She was preaching,
Yeah.
and she, we weren't really feeling what she was saying. At one point, she was talking about the demons at the cross or something, or somebody, and she's like, they're sitting there looking like a bunch of dummies. Or something, and she's like some of y'all out there, something. We're like, wow, this took a turn.
Like some of y'all out there.
So,
Yeah.
what are we gonna talk about?
That's actually a perfect segue. Let's talk about church leadership.
Okay.
Okay, to talk about church leadership, I think you have to talk about church and you have to talk about leadership
Yeah,
because I think that they're not one and the same.
they're not.
And I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's start there. What's church?
Do we want to start talking about West Church or leadership?
Let's define church. We can define church.
Uh,
So by
what is church
church,
to you?
huh?
Oh, yeah, saying what is church to you?
Yeah. So by church, I'm talking about. Well, there's two different types of churches. More than that, but two basic types.
Mhm.
Okay. So the type that is capital C church is those who have been redeemed by God, by Jesus, and brought into a family of other believers. And so in that way, the church is expansive across denominations, across countries, across continents. You know what I'm saying? We have people in all these places that are part of the church, the called out, the ones who God selected to be in his family.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's the capital C. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the lowercase c, where you have fractions of the capital C church who have fragmented and denominationalized themselves to believe certain things together, and almost to become like a clubhouse, almost, you know. And so in that space, there are leaders who assume positions to help the lowercase c function and to continue to exist. So that's the church I want to talk about. Are we good on that definition before we go to leadership?
It's just for me. It's like I feel like you just gave like I just had to swallow something really because I think the topic is loaded.
Let's define leadership too, because I think there's different types of leadership too. So I'll call this the capital L leadership, since I called the other one capital C church. So capital L leadership is what Jesus modeled, which is more serving than actual setting himself up to be like the idol of the church. He served the people, right? And so that is, for me, the essence of leadership. The true essence is servitude, calling people up to become themselves, to be used for God in his purpose and will for their lives. So that for me is real leadership. Now the other leadership I'm talking about, the lowercase L, is the leaders who have been put up by people to assist in the organizing of God's people. And sometimes that crosses over from servitude to them becoming the idol of our affection and of our worship. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. And so that's what I want to talk about, the lowercase L and the lowercase c. So church leadership. You went to the military and did a stint in the Marines. I went to theology school.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I guess it might be beneficial if we go over like everyone's involvement with the church, like starting out, like were you all
But
were you?
it's
Okay.
coming.
Okay.
It's
Oh, okay,
coming.
okay,
Yes,
okay,
it's
okay.
coming.
Okay. That's
And
good.
so,
Okay.
so you were military. I went theology school, but, and you know what I'm talking about. When you look at our lives as young people, we were probably your age. We were the future of the church, and probably more so you than me. And what I mean by that is we had already began to establish ourselves and kind of climb up the ladder in the church. He was getting called to speak at different churches, like different engagements, sitting on platforms with the big wigs, being able to stand up and speak and exhort and, things like that. I had a more musical being. And so I was like teaching songs and, climbing up the ladder in that way. My speaking gifts were maturing as well, not as far as his in that season. But we were very much on the trajectory of church leadership. My question is, why didn't we reach it?
I know from my experience, I remember specific times where I was offered positions as youth pastor, or I was, come here, be this, let me license you. And I didn't want it in any way. And while I do think that there is some type of, love and care, whatever, again, I think also we just default to programs and systems a lot too. And so even though I won't say that these people didn't actually love me, I think that approach was more so a default to the systems and the way things are flowing to the point where, like, in some way or another, a license they felt would validate you. Or at least to the people that they presented you to. They couldn't just say, so I was already doing the work. They couldn't just put me up in front and have me and assist in that. I had to be licensed.
Okay, so when you say license, you mean like a piece of paper license?
A piece of paper.
Okay, cool. It wasn't like a verbal thing. It was just.
It was both.
Okay.
It would be like, I'm licensing you and I'm ordaining you to do this,
Gotcha.
and you do it publicly and all that kind of stuff. Because, and I understand to some extent, like when someone is presenting you, or a license to some extent is saying that others have observed this about you, and they're, so I get that to an extent, but at the same time, like my works were showing for themselves. And for somebody, to me, it seemed a little bit, reductive or kind of like, regression, or like, why am I'm traveling all over the country and even some other parts of the world doing things that we're talking about. And now I need to come back and get a license to do that I've been already doing. And so I said, like we said earlier in the other conversation, how we've always been questioners and, not just accepting whatever is given to us. So to me, it was just like, this doesn't make sense. Why do I need that? And I think that when you buck against the system, even sometimes, it is the lowercase c is a system, and when you not even buck against it, but when you just don't conform to it, it's like your value starts to decrease. You're not needed, because if you're not going to listen, like we need people who listen to the system, who do it this certain way, and fortunately for myself and probably for you as well, like I don't care. Like, and I say that loosely, so I don't mean I don't care in the sense of like an aggressive, like I don't care what you say, but it's like I can default back to my zero and say, well, that doesn't add or take away from anything that I am. Whether you like it or not, you can put me in front of your people, you can not put me in front of your people. It's not going to take away from me. Like, I'm still going to be where I need to be when I need to be there, and I'm still going to be able to give and receive what I need to give and receive from that situation without this type of support system necessarily. And I actually don't want that support system if it's dependent on these rules and having to conform to this idea of, So I think that for me, that's partially why I know for me that I didn't get there because I was questioning things and I wasn't conforming, still questioning, still not conforming. Uh, which is interesting too because it seems like the church now, I see more questioning and conforming across the board from an outside perspective because I'm not really that involved anymore. But I see more people questioning things to the point where what I may have been doing 20 years ago that wasn't on social media because there was no social media, you now see people saying, wait a second, and it is, I see that it's happening. So maybe I was more so, or we were more so, or just there was lots of us out there that we just didn't know. They were actually part of this thing that says, no,
Yeah.
show me where you're coming from. Like, why is that necessary? Why is this what we're teaching? Why do we have to fall in line with this, that, or the other? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are your...
Yeah, I think similar to what you're saying, man. Like, I think it was by the time that I knew I was in a model that you had to do certain things to keep climbing, I was already more than the model could offer. And that's not like being arrogant, but I just felt like it was a step backwards to try to fit in a system that wasn't forward thinking or forward moving. You know what I'm saying? I think for me, I had already had more experiences around the world, like in other churches or in other people groups, even like different racial groups too. Like all of us do church differently. And I was exposed to a lot of that. And so I think that made me question, why do we do X, Y, Z here? And if you can answer that, it made me question everything, because I think a lot of it, and people could probably say this about every church, not just our particular denomination, but a lot of it is tradition, and it has no real biblical foundation, And for me, like once I discovered that, like it was almost like Pandora's box was open, and it was hard to close the box, And similar to what you're saying, like I was proposed a license as well, and I think I did do my license, but it worked for that organization. And so even if you, like you said, you traveled, that piece of paper don't mean nothing in other places. So it's almost like I'm licensing you to stay here. Whereas the purpose of a real license is to be able to travel.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Passports.
Yeah.
Driver's license.
Yeah.
It equips you to move and be mobile. Like this one, it almost arrested you to an organization. You can travel, but within this circle.
And to where I send you, or where I okay for you to travel to.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're very much locked in to that particular whatever.
Yeah.
Which is very, like, that's not liberation. That's not freedom that we're talking about. And here's the thing. I just don't understand for the life of me why we're so afraid of questions.
Yeah.
If what you're saying is fact, then if someone comes to me and sits there and says, is your name Sean? I'm not challenged by that question. And I say, yes, my name is Sean. And if they were to say, no, it's not, I would just be like, oh, okay, what is it then? Like it wouldn't be a thing for me. Because why? Because the fact of the matter is that my name is Sean. Our beliefs are so fragile, and beliefs in general are pretty much fragile, that when somebody questions it, we want to defend it so badly that we don't feel like it seems like logic goes out of the door, or the need for logic, or the need for like investigating. It's now all of a sudden it's a threat. And my perspective, or the perspective I think is healthy, is to be able to be open to listening and to questioning and what have you. And if I can't, if my questioning a certain approach or perspective is a threat, then that structure is already doomed.
Yeah.
It's already extremely
Already.
fragile.
Yeah.
If me asking a question now makes you feel threatened, like
Yeah.
then you don't have anything. You have zero substance.
Right.
And I think, and that should be questioned too. Like I have, why am I so protective over this to the point where I can't pull back the sheets and the covers and actually see? We so readily accept so many things, the Christmas tree in the church, like a Christmas holiday. History says it's pagan. History says the Easter's a pagan holiday. But religiously, we even got the song "When Was Jesus Born?" now, last month of the year.
I don't know.
You don't.
You dating yourself now.
I'm guessing this is a church song or something.
Sing a little bit of it.
I'm not about to sing that. I'll sing it if you sing
I'll
it.
sing it with you.
Oh, you sing it.
I do respond. I respond to you.
You got me in tears. I don't think I can
Okay, let's not.
because let me see. I can't get myself together to even do it. Okay, no, I can't even do it because every time I want to laugh. But when was Jesus born? Now,
Yeah.
last month of the year, and we preach this thing, right? And we believe it, and it's got to be the whole thing,
Yeah.
right? We accept it so easily and so readily, and then we regurgitate it and we teach it to our children, we repeat it and everything without challenging and asking any of these questions. And if someone does, all of a sudden we have all sorts of illogical reasons as to why it's okay. But then there could be something else that's,
Yeah.
why?
So, like, even the way I do church now is seen as a rebel. It's so out of the box. Like, people don't know how to interpret it. And I know you live a similar life. I know you said you don't do a lot of church anymore, but like even your life, I'm sure you have received some criticism for, some values you may possess right now. I guess my question would be, how is it navigating that space of being oppositionally defiant or a reformer or a person who questions everything? How has that colored your existence today?
I mean, I'm learning. I'm living. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't. Again, if someone feels threatened, I have to live by the same thing. If someone feels threatened by me questioning or challenging something they bring to me, if someone questions or challenges my stuff or my approach, then I feel like I'm being hypocritical if I'm not open to the challenge, to have the conversation, to listening, and to what have you. And that in itself is a whole dance that happens. So if we're having a discussion and someone just emphatically tells me God said, that's all good and well for you. But this isn't a discussion. What do I have to say against what God said to you?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you already have the answer
And I think people know that. That's why they say that, because they don't want a discussion.
about this, right?
Either I can disagree with God in your view, or I can, comply with you. That's the only two responses.
I had a friendship once, which we've reconciled, but they sent a message to another friend and myself saying that God told them that he needed to stop talking to us. My one friend was a little bit more, like concerned by like, well, why would you this that, and the other? And he comes to me, was like, did you get the such and such? I was like, oh yeah. Like immediately after I read the message, I said, okay, and I deleted it. And we had a friendship. But if God told you to distance yourself from me, what do I have to say about that? What am I going to do about that? Am I going to plead with God about what God told you about me? And then what am I, some redheaded stepchild? That I'm the toxic individual? And so God has now condemned me to be toxic and you to be holy and righteous. So if that's what the situation is for you, I want that to be for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, and there's nothing really I can say about that. So I was like, oh, I just delete the message. And, you know, whenever they come around to whatever they come around to, I'll respect that just as well. But as soon as you start telling me what God told you, and even if it makes me look like I'm a toxic or bad or whatever, wonderful for you. There's nothing else I can say about that at this point, because God, which is probably really just a magnified you in your brain, has told you this about me, and I know none of this is valid, but what am I going to do?
Yeah, I haven't really been able to chime in because I have the benefit of not like growing up in a specific church. I'm for better or for worse, we've always kind of church hopped. And so all of my learnings have been.
Well, let me clean that up.
Well, but you,
The word church
There's a
hop, I think,
negative
is like,
connotation.
oh,
So
see, I don't know. I ain't church
he ain't
like
from
that.
that world. But no, we were at one church for 8 years, which is an eternity for nowadays. 8 years. I got my degree. We went to another church for 8 years, and then that's when we like planted our own church shortly after that. So that's what he meant by church hop. Not that we spend a year here, a year. No, we don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
My bad. Well,
But no, I got you.
okay.
it's just different generations, different times, different whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So everything I feel that I've learned has been like the example that everyone else has said, and also like my own observations from what I read by myself. And I mean, I don't know if I necessarily be like described as a rebel in my beliefs. I try not to like, fly off the handle with some of my beliefs. But what I hear like from you two talking, I think like the strife in the church is just a lack of like genuine prayer. Like, I think the simple solution to like if someone is to say that they have a message from God is to like pray about it, like come together and pray to see if you're hearing the same exact thing. Because if you're hearing the same exact thing, then it's like, okay, we come from different backgrounds, we have different observations, we glean different things from Scripture. But if we both pray in the way that we pray and we're hearing the same exact thing, then maybe there is some validity there. But to your point, if someone says God says, and then you both pray, and ideally I think it would be a group of people. I think leadership is about like a group of accountability, like prayer partners, people that do life with you who know you in and out. Kind of like the friendship y'all have. I think that should be the friendship that everybody has in church leadership.
Right.
So I think a group of people like that should come together and like seek the Lord genuinely, with the example that we see in Acts and just the closeness and nearness of God, like all throughout the Gospels.
Yeah.
Like we should never feel estranged or that one individual or one group of people is getting the message that we aren't.
And that's why they call me a rebel, because I do things team style, leadership wise. Like, we don't do a hierarchical system. Everybody's equal. You know what I'm saying? But I think that's more biblical than what we see nowadays in the church. There wasn't one person calling the shots that everybody acquiesced to. You know what I'm saying? It was group. Like he said in the book of Acts, the council in Acts, I think it was 13 or 15, one of those, where they traveled to this group of people who made the decisions together through prayer and, you know what I'm saying, and discussion, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't like your word against mine. It was a group being sensitive to the Spirit of God. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if I can interject, I think one of the challenges with that whole thing is just that so often we're making our decisions based off of conditioning and not actually sensitivity to truth, to whatever truth is. You know what I'm saying? Because you have all these, like if you just look at politically without getting all into it, you have one side that says God says this is supposed to be the leader. And you have another side saying God says this is supposed to be the leader. And they all have their separate sets of councils and everything, and they're all praying. But one or both or all, whatever, are likely just finding others with similar conditioning, and then making their decisions based off of that. So if it's a genuine, like you're saying, like actually like group of people who are sensitive to just the flow of what, you know, is being communicated, that's different than just what we have what we see a lot of today.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of there's a lot of God has chosen this person to be this, that, and the other.
Right.
That is questionable.
Which this person that you're talking to, that you're holding up with your hand like that, is my equal.
Mm-hmm.
He's not, or she's not more than me.
Right.
Never in the Bible do you see that.
Never.
Like, we are the body of Christ. I hear people say this a lot, that anything with two heads is a freak. I agree 100%. That's why Jesus is the head of the church. That's why Jesus is the head of the body. Everybody else is equal. Everybody else is equal. He is the head of the church.
So I have a question about that. That might be kind of. Let me just go back to rewind a little bit, where you talked about you being considered a rebel, and I was thinking about that, and I was just like, part of it was thinking, do people consider me a rebel? And I was like, I actually don't think they consider me. Maybe they do. I don't know. I think that the place where I am now is like most of the people that I knew, at least particularly when I was in the, you know, more in the church space, who may have come to me for counsel or for, you know, like most people knew I could spit scripture. You couldn't.
I remember. I vouched for you. I
Yeah,
vouched
like,
for you.
You could tell me, and I'm like,
Boy,
oh no.
He could preach now. Don't get it twisted.
I literally used to wake up and read the Bible from sun up to
I've seen him do
sundown.
it.
Just
I've seen him
read
do it.
and remember and write, and not just for the sake of memorization, but for sake like that to me was feeding my relationship. So, but those people who were in that circle with me, I'm quite certain that probably 90-something% of them would never come to me for counsel at this point. Not because Sean's a rebel. I don't think they consider me at all. You know.
Well, and I think that speaks to what we're talking about. If they can't identify you within this framework and within this system, you cease to exist.
That's pretty much, I'm a ghost.
Yeah, you cease to exist.
I'm okay with that, but I am. I do feel like I'm somewhat of a ghost. But my question is, and that was just because I thought about that when you said that, but the question concerning what you just said was talking about the head, and I was thinking about this earlier, which is interesting that you should bring it up, because I was thinking, when we think of, okay, the brain, right, needs the heart, and the brain needs the liver, and the brain needs the nerves, and the brain needs all this stuff, right? But we've magnified the brain above the heart sometimes, you know, or we've met, like, what is the most important part? I don't, is there a most important part?
Come on.
And I don't even feel like Jesus presented himself as the most important part.
Right.
So being the head doesn't mean I'm more important than you. It might mean I know more in a sense of, like,
and
have a broader perspective.
Yeah, my function is different.
Right. My function is different.
My function is different.
But my function is still dependent on the function of everything else.
Right.
And I think that some people, we separate ourselves from that, which is, and we make ourselves subservient, you know what I'm saying? But it's all serving each other. You said it earlier, like, Jesus' whole approach was to leadership was servitude. And so I think that, we think that we're more noble or something if we, crouch down and, oh, little me and weak me, and I just need the head, and without the head I'm nothing. But it's like, yes, that's true. You need the head. Without the head, you're not this flow of being. But you need the heart too. You need the liver. You need the pancreas. You need the kidneys. You need the lungs. And without the lungs, then you can have all the heads you want. And the head. What can the head do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's like even Jesus, when he was praying in John 14, he was talking about just the relationship between him and the Father, and how the Father doesn't love him any more than he loves us, or he loves us the same. It is what it is. It's what it says. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I love you, Jesus, then I love you. And if this Jesus saying love your neighbor as you love yourself, then how can Jesus not exempt from that love, right? So that means Jesus has to treat me the same way Jesus treats Jesus, right? And if Jesus is treating Jesus the way God treats Jesus, and God is treating Jesus as this eternal grand being that just doesn't have a beginning or an end, then why do we treat ourselves any less?
Come on.
Why? I mean, why is it? Oh, but that's Jesus. But Jesus didn't present that. It presented as that, you know. And this is supposed to be the leader.
The one who was serving everybody, like taking off his clothes and tying it around his waist to bend down and wash feet and to, distribute food to people. Like, this is the model of headship that we're talking about. Like, by all means, you would look at this person and conclude that they are not all that important. Which is, to your point, he's saying, I'm not.
Because what am I without you? What is it? I mean, we think that Jesus exists. Like, that's a thing I think is a real disservice to just being in general. I could say to the church, but just being in general. Because whether we say God, Jesus, some people say the universe, or whatever they say, we still separate ourselves from that thing as if that thing existed without us and we exist without that thing, and we just have, which is weird. It's really weird. So we think that we just, we came out of God. It's like, well, if God is eternal and we came out of God, then when did we begin? When did we begin? And if God's eternal and we came out of God, are we not eternal? Are we only eternal if we do this, that, and the other? Just questions, you know what I'm saying? Like, that I think deserve to be presented. Why are we treating ourselves like we're this separate entity? We want to be, but we're not. It's like we so flip-floppy on it.
Yeah.
1 minute we're the body, and we're part of the whole, and we're part, we're just other functioning members of this thing, just like, and then another time we're some ostracized experience that just happened, an afterthought.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna let Isaac get his question off, but let me say this before you.
What was the question?
So you said, why do we treat ourselves like we are less than? Why do we treat other people like they're more than?
Why? Which, see, that's why when you mentioned leadership, I felt like I was swallowing a rock, like a big, large boulder almost, because I don't understand why we feel like we need leaders. Leading each other is one thing, holding hands, going together, but to submit all of my energy to you finding a way and then showing me why, like, what do you have, and that puts you in that position. Why would I give that to you?
Yeah, no, I'm going to stop because I can keep going. But yeah, God, that wasn't his model for life. David, the people of Israel wanted a king. They wanted leadership.
Before that, they wanted Moses. No, you go talk to him.
You go talk to him. Let us stay there. You go do it. And so what he's saying is the embracer of leadership back then, I know it's different now. We made it different. But back then, the embracing of leadership is a rejection of God. The embracing of human leadership, should I say, is a rejection of a spiritual God. You know what I'm saying? We're rejecting God by wanting to follow somebody who looked like us. You know what I'm saying? Who identify with us in that way, other than Jesus. You know what I'm saying? All right, go ahead. My bad.
You good? I just wanted to say to your point, like all the things that we like ascribe to God is impossible without us being here. Like Jesus can't be a redeemer. He can't be a savior if he didn't have someone to redeem or to save. You know what I'm saying? And I think the other side of it is it's like we're nothing without him too.
Come on.
Because he created us.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think the main reason why people put, I'll start with Jesus. I think the main reason why we put Jesus on a pedestal is because he set the example, right? Without his example of what it means to be a true leader, to serve, I think we would be all oblivious to the notion of what it means to actually be a servant, right? Which is like the whole point why Jesus had to like be right in front of our faces to set that example. The Old Testament says that we have a heart condition that wants that propels and compels us to position people higher than they need to be. Whether it's ourselves or whether it's people that we look at based off physical attributes and not a heart posture. And so I think my beliefs are a little bit nuanced, but I think there is a need for leadership because of that. Like we need people to set examples, right? Jesus set an example. I think we have parents for a reason. I think fathers are very important to set the example for what it means to be a leader, so their sons and their daughters can grow up to be equal, if not greater, leaders. And I say that my beliefs are nuanced because I think I might be in the minority here when I say I think that churches need leadership in order to set that example. I think you'd agree how important a role you play with the refuge. I don't know if I'm supposed to name drop. But without you as the quote unquote leader of that church, no one would have a figure to look at to observe the Jesus in you to go back to Jesus. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I think it brings us back to the beginning. How do you define leadership?
Oh, so that's exactly what I was wanting to say.
But yeah, it's servitude.
Yeah. And so I think in that respect, it's not about the person per se, but the notion of vessels positioned to guide people, whether they get credit for it or not, whether they get a platform or not. And with that definition, you have leaders everywhere in the church, not just behind the pulpit. There's leaders in the pew, there's leaders in the choir stand, there's leaders that greeting you at the door. You know what I'm saying? And so I think if we define leadership the right way, you do need that, but it's not in one person.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely a joint effort. Again, I think we as like people, because of the fall, have a tendency to look at what we think is leadership and aspire to be that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think, and it's weird because like everyone's at fault, right? Just as humans, but I don't think we always consider the person who's being called a leader, like how they feel about it too. I say that because I'm trying to choose my words better.
Just say it.
Like they can't leaders or aspiring leaders, or better yet, let's draw it back. People who have like specific leadership giftings, right? We all agree some people have like better leadership giftings than others. They have a propensity to lead, to serve better than others.
I don't
like David, for example. God chose David out of a group of people because of his.
But he only chose David because the people said they wanted a leader.
Because they wanted Saul, though.
But they wanted a leader, period. They, like if you go back to Moses when he wanted to meet with all the people, and they were too terrified or frightened or whatever, and so they said, "We don't want to go, Moses. You do it, and just come back and tell him what he said." But the intent. Like if you look in the New Testament where it said there's going to come a day where no man will say to his brother, know the Lord, because you all know the Lord for yourself. You know what I'm saying? In that sense, I don't need to teach you. It's a communion. It's actually a common union between all of us where it's not so much me leading you, it's me maybe sharing a perspective that you didn't have. And that is leadership in a sense, because I'm now following your perspective. I'm following what you see, but it's not like you are lording over or that you have an authoritative position.
Right.
You just you see something in a way I don't see it. And so now I have to come from your and see it that way. So I'm following you in that sense. So it's a sharing, but it's not so much a position here. This is my position and I am the leader and I see the way. Like that's why I think the church you're a part of, I mean that's modeled after like I see it this way. Let's do, and then another person has this type of gift or whatever, and well, let's and everybody's putting in it, so everybody's leading each other, just like the head and the heart and the liver, and we're all like, okay, well, in this capacity, I'm the leader. In this capacity, you're the leader. In that capacity, you're the leader. But everything is leading.
I got you. So would y'all say like being a leader is being humble and willing enough to serve other people?
I don't think it exists without it, for one thing.
So that means there are people who aren't willing and are prideful to either prop themselves up or to think themselves too humble, false humility, to not serve other people.
I would say there's a lot of all of that, but I would also say a lot of it is because we're not educated properly And we've discussed education as far as like the true word education stems from educe, which means to draw out of. And we have perceived education as teaching or just inducing. Like what we've been doing a lot is inducing, reducing, what's another deucing, whatever. Like we're doing like inducing is similar to inducting. I'm bringing you into a system of beliefs, or
Gotcha.
I'm reducing and I'm breaking you down, all that kind of stuff. But true educing and true education actually comes from me being able to see what you are, see this well of water, drop down a bucket, pull it out, and now you see this bucket and realize what you have in you. And I don't think that that's what's happening. So when you have this system of reduction and induction and whatever, now you have a society of people who are running around lost. And so I don't think it's necessarily always intentional. Sometimes it may be, or just, people avoiding whatever is presented to them, that they're wondering that, like you have this gift and they're saying, no. So they might be resisting it. But in a lot of cases, I think it's just the whole system of just people who have now been broken down so much that they don't even realize that they don't need somebody to hold their hand and take them there.
Yeah.
And so, but it's intentional too. Like even if you just,
But there is importance to having someone there to notice that in them and drawing out of them.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't know if I like. Well, I don't know if the word importance is what I would choose.
Well, without that person, how else would they come to that realization?
They would come
Is
to
it
that
a God
realization.
said
I
type
feel
of
like
thing, or
I feel like this is just my thing. Oh, go ahead.
And I was gonna say, I don't look at it as without that person.
That's probably what I was gonna say too.
I would look at it as without us being together. So it's not about you. It's about us being together that I learn who I am. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we talked years ago. We had a conversation where we were talking about the word recognizing. So you can't recognize something, what we said, without first being cognizant of it. So even if I think I'm teaching you, if you don't have the mental capacity to process 5 plus 5, it doesn't matter how many times I tell you that it's 10. If you're able to recognize truth in any shape or any type of fact, whatever, you're only able to recognize it because somebody brought it to your remembrance. It's not that you didn't know it already, in some way, shape, or form. Even if you weren't able to shape it out into a certain formula or pattern, whatever, it was there. You can't teach somebody what they don't know in that sense. You know what I'm saying? You're just bringing out what's already there. And so I think that the type of leadership that is healthiest or more effective is just, first of all, I can't bring what's out of you if I'm not seeing you. And you're not, unless you're open enough to just, investigate along with me. It doesn't matter how much I see of you, you're not going to see it yourself. So you're participating. It's all participant. What's it called? It's just a whole process of participating. Like you're leading, but you're not. I'm following, but I'm not, because I have to go inside. Ultimately, you know what I'm saying? I have to go inside. I'm responsible for going inside to that space that exists, that you're telling me exists there. You can't go inside for me.
right?
So once you get to that space, there's nobody leading anymore, really. You know what I'm saying?
So you're saying like it's a process. Like there's a time period between not fully recognizing it within yourself and then fully recognizing it.
Or just the leadership thing in general is a soul sharing, basically. It's we're all contributing. It's not so much of me knowing the way, or one individual, one position of authority knowing the way and the direction, and then taking and guiding the others. It's like, if I'm just blindly following you, then I'm following you, and I have no idea about what it is that my purpose is, or my space, or what I have to contribute. If I'm just following you. But if it's a true leader, that true leader sees you and draws that out of you, and or helps guide you to you, basically. You know what I'm saying?
So it's both like being led and also being intentional about discovering what it is God has put in you.
Which you can't be led to that. Nobody can lead you to that. You have to do their own investigation. You know what I'm saying?
You have to do their own investigating. So then what's the purpose of the person that's leading?
They're just help. Like if I see something that you're not looking at, maybe, Like
It's
I was saying
like a
earlier
perspective thing.
with my mother, when she saw I was actively doing this other thing, but she saw me investing all my attention over here, and she says, I see what you're doing, but maybe you should really consider this over here because you're really good at it. So that's a type of leadership where she sees it, and it's not like I wasn't doing it, and I was skilled at it and talented at it, but it had to take a moment. I had to listen to what she said, but then at that point, the ball's in my hand. I have no leader at this point. I'm responsible for going in and investigating and seeing and uncovering, and in that space, it's just totally that situation in me. You know.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
So I think the only thing that, at least I feel like what we're talking about with leadership, is taking away the whole pedestal out of the whole, pedestalizing people and making them as the authoritarian or the know-it-all of a certain whatever.
We can narrow it down to that particular instance, but we can also talk about it abroad. Do you not think your mom is like an authoritative figure or a leader in your son-daughter relationship? I'm sorry, mother-son relationship.
I don't.
Okay. So do you think you had the capacity to lead her at any point in time?
I definitely do.
Okay.
I definitely do. And I think that you have the capacity to lead me. I have the capacity to lead Shedrach. Shedrach has the capacity to lead, I think it's all, again, to me, it's a thing of having a perspective that another doesn't have that could potentially, expand their experience or whatever.
Yeah.
And me sharing that, not telling you to do what to do, but just simply sharing my experience and my perspective. Right. And then you likewise doing the same thing. It's just like a total flip-flop of leadership to where it's not one person just that knows the way. Right. And I do the same thing with my mother, and she does it with me. Like when we travel, which we'll get into, some other topic, but some other time. When we travel, I'm pretty much, in that sense, the type of leader with my mother. Right. She goes lots of countries with me. But this is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to go. This is the airline we're going to take. This is where we're going to stay. This is my idea of this. If she presents and says, I want to do this, of course, we're open to it. But in that sense, she has pretty much yielded to my leadership. Yeah. But I'm not trying to be an authority over her. It's just that I'm more familiar with that approach or whatever. And she knows that I'm more fluid in that area, so she would just kind of surrender to that.
I got you. Do you think you were brought to that point, or do you think do you think you were brought to that point where you could lead her in that way, or do you think there was like an innate, like out the womb, as soon as you could talk, you would be able to like to lead in that way? And when I say lead, I mean like to be able to call shots.
I think babies do all the time. With parents, I'm not a parent, but I hear all the time where parents say that their children taught them, taught them how to even be a parent, and it's not verbal. It's different ways that the child communicates, or even the way a child thinks sometimes, that they just say stuff because it's not polluted by any type of conditioning and logic and all that kind of stuff, and they have these ideas, and it's just like, and we learn from them. And that to me is a type of leadership, if I'm willing to follow them.
Yeah, I think I'm not arguing against that point. I think I've always like had something to contribute to you and mom, right, growing up, and obviously vice versa. But me thinking about like the idea of like immaturity and being brought into maturity is like an entirely different subject. Like there was a point in time where I wanted to drop out of middle school and wanted to be homeschooled. Like if I were to make that authoritative call in middle school, I would say that was an immature decision. And if I were to lead my parents to make that decision, who knows? Obviously, like I can't tell like how that would have panned out. But I don't think I would be in a position that I am now. And so my point in saying that is I think there's a role that I guess more mature believers take in nurturing the immature believers. And I use believers because we're talking about church leadership, but this applies, I think, to everything, which is why we have a school system. We have teachers teaching like the basic things so that we can come to a point where we can like observe on our own and come to our own conclusions, even though there are some facilities that kind of teach like this is the exact way, which I'm not agreeing with that. But to go back to my original point, I think
I have a question about that
go
too.
Go ahead.
Because you said, that kind of they would lead you to a point while you're immature. So is there a point, would you say, where that leadership is no longer needed?
I don't think so.
But just based off what you just said, I'm just curious, like, because if I'm helping lead someone who's less mature, once they reach that level of maturity that I was leading them to, do they still need my leadership in that sense?
Not in that exact sense. Well, we'll take the analogy for parenthood, right? I'm going to be, what? When I'm 40, how old will you be?
Oh.
So, yeah, 20 years from now, I'll be 40. My dad will be 64. I have no experience or the wherewithal to know the problems that comes with being a 40-year-old, but I imagine they're different from a 20-year-old's problems. And so my dad, having been 40 years old, now being 64 in this scenario that I've made up, he'll be able to speak to and teach me the troubles and the problems that come with being a 40-year-old. And I think as he progresses and gets older, and as I get older, we'll still be able to relate in that linear way. Simultaneously, I hope to disciple or help other people who are younger than me. If I'm 40, 20-year-old, I'm having these problems now, so I can relate to those specific issues and be able to bring someone not only to like a place of maturity where they can make decisions like pertaining to their like particular age and problems, but also like a continuing maturity, because like, time's a thing, age is a thing, growth is a thing.
Well,
And
I
so-
will say though,
Yeah, go ahead.
with that, while I agree with what you're saying, that your 22 is not my 22. Like,
Right.
I could literally learn from you. I could just, in fact, it would probably benefit me more, even though I could assist you in certain things. Say, listen, when I was this, there's certain general things, ideas. It's about age groups that we have. But as far as the time that we're in now, and just the way 22-year-olds, whatever, relate to the world, it's so different and far from what, like, when I was just saying, when we were hanging out, we were doing snail mail still. The communication was just so different.
Right.
And so even like when we met, it was a different type of meeting because I didn't just see them on social media. I didn't just text them. I didn't, it was gaps of months and stuff. And, we just didn't have as much exposure to the world. And so you're 22. I think at this point for me, if I want to really assist a 22-year-old, one of the best things I could do is listen to them to see what their life is like now. And then I could apply some of the stuff. So it's still like an ebb and flow.
Of course.
It's still you're still teaching me.
Yeah.
So it's still that same picture of we're leading each other.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I'm saying?
I
We're
definitely
walking
agree.
together.
Yeah, but I don't think a 10-year-old will be able to teach me like 40-year-old problems ever. I might be able to glean from them, sure, but in terms of like my arthritis is acting up, Dad. Like what?
Okay. Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
But like a 10-year-old's gonna be like, what arthritis? Like what? Obviously, I can like learn like life things, like universal things here and there. But
I think that's the point. I think both of y'all, even though y'all saying it different ways, are acknowledging that there are people for every scenario that can lead you in some way or another. You know what I'm saying? And so I think if we agree on that, then we agree on there's not one central figure that's going to enter your life to know everything.
right, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think there is beauty in every decade of age, 10-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 30, 40, 50, that you need to be holistic in your living. You know what I'm saying? And so if that is the case, I think that does make a strong case for there not being this central figure who has every answer for life.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think that you can lead anybody that you're not willing to listen to.
Yeah.
Actively listen and perceive. And like you were saying, see things from another conversation about being able to see things from that other person's perspective. You know what I'm saying? Like when you were talking about um, after I was going through the breakup and everything, and you wanted to give, it's like, hey, I would want this for him. But you had to kind of put yourself in the position of how I would feel. Like, if I can't actually put myself where you are and see things where you are, which means I have to then take the position of a follower. So it's like a total ebb and flow. Like, if I want to truly lead you, I have to see who you are. I have to hear and see and perceive who you are, and also kind of have an idea of what that could evolve into.
Yeah.
As opposed to just having, because I think a lot of times, since we're talking about leadership, there's just this cookie cut type of presentation or a blanket type of leadership where you have this full congregation or crowd of people or whatever, group, small group, whatever it is. And instead of actually seeing the people that you're leading, quote unquote, you just you have this idea, you have this mission, whatever, and you're just directing everybody towards that mission.
That's right.
So it just is almost like these big time corporations, like where you don't really matter that much. We have the mission statement. You're coming on board. You are here to support this mission statement. And then if you're not supporting that, then you're not really of value to the system, And
you're moving them in that direction without any regard for their natural inclinations.
Exactly.
And I think Jesus shows us this beautifully when he meets Peter for the first time. He's out there fishing. And so he takes into account that this guy's a fisherman. So let me move him to fish for men. He's still acting in those, the framework, but Jesus is then embellishing what he's already good at. And I think we don't do that in church. Like, we don't care what people are naturally good at. We have a destination in mind for them that we want to get them there no matter how they're shaped, no matter how they're bent. Like, we are determined to get you from A to Z, even if it means you becoming something other than you are.
Yeah, and that ties into my point that I was going to make about David. Like, looking on the other side of leadership, like, I think majority of people will look at the pastor and think that that's what it means to be a leader, right? Like, that's what I should aspire to be if I want to lead in some capacity. But in saying that, I think that the people, like the majority of people, the congregation, are oftentimes the people who put emphasis on that, not necessarily the person that is leading, right?
Wait, say that again.
I think the emphasis in like pastors being the epitome of leadership falls onto the congregation, not necessarily the person that's leading.
You mean like the people are the ones who put him in that pedestal and not him?
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not always the case, but I think it's worth considering because I think. Go ahead.
It's not always the case, but we have to combat what people are trying to do to us.
We had this conversation in the car.
Did we?
When we were talking about, like, even if you know you're influential to somebody, you have to kind of, you don't have to, but for me, it's important to say, listen, I appreciate that I'm whatever. And I can even accept that, but you couldn't hear any of this stuff unless it was already, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I need you to not make me this.
Yeah, no, it's
and we
because
don't
it's
see
dangerous.
enough of that from leaders today. Not to cut you out.
No, that was exactly the point. Like, I think, I'll use me as an example. I speak pretty well. Like, I carry a certain kind of confidence thanks to you. But I think because of that, people look at me and think that I'm meant to lead. But again, when they think of leadership, they think of preaching and teaching and stuff like that. And I'm like, nah, that's not what I've been called to do. Like, I have a pretty solid relationship with God to know that I need to like have certain ducks in order first, and that means primarily to serve. And I think because of this twisted idea that people have of leadership and leadership being pastoral, we forget how important it is for even like God says like the offices that have like a greater level of humility. They're not necessarily seen. I'm thinking of like people who work in the nursery or children's church or the janitors. Like, they're all important, very, very important to the function of the body in the church. But I think when we look at janitors and pastors, we're the people that bring janitors down here and preachers up here. when in reality it should be equal, but it's from us. We're the people that equalize it, right? But I do think there are some pastors who like would push standards down and bring themselves up. That's a bad pastor, obviously. And I think my last point is something I've been like pondering lately is when we see someone or we perceive that someone has some sort of anointing, we assume that it has something to do with teaching or preaching. But it's also neglecting the fact that the smaller offices need people who are anointed as well.
Yeah.
Like why all of a sudden do we not think that the nursery leaders need to be anointed in some capacity to have a relationship with God? Why do we not think that the janitors need to be anointed in some capacity to do their job well? Like, why do we think normal Christians, people who don't have some sort of calling, are being left to do those things while the anointed ones are supposed to be the ones that are seen the most?
Why? There's so many whys. Let me tell you. Because even as you're just talking, I'm just like listening and thinking about the many whys that I have. Like, why do we? What is it? Not why in the sense of just a random why, but like if we had the time to actually go into like what, like if we could dissect it and just look at it, you know?
Yeah.
Because this is like a really, and I think at the end of it, we probably just wouldn't even have an answer. Why are we doing this? Like, you know, why? Why do we perpetuate this?
I think, and it's just one of my theories, I think people need somebody to blame for what they don't get accomplished.
I could see that as definitely a portion of it. If we don't get there, it was your fault.
It's your fault.
Yeah.
And so having you as my leader absolves me of that.
I could definitely
Because I've done that before.
See that, yeah.
When I was younger, like, if I didn't get a certain thing or, you know, experience a certain thing I thought I should have, I look for somebody to blame. And it's easy to blame the person who is supposed to be your, you know, your spiritual leader or your spiritual authority. Like, it's easy to do that. And I think that principle, though, plays out in all those relationships that we see, that we just finished discussing. You know what I'm saying? If I can absolve myself of responsibility, I'm going to do it every time.
Even if it's not consciously, like somewhere in there where, you know.
Because otherwise, the opposite of that is saying it's my fault. It's my responsibility to do X, Y, Z. That's a scary thought because I'm going to be accountable to that. If that's true, like if I don't reach my full potential and it's my fault, well then I got to answer for that.
And that is the honest reality. The Bible says that not everybody should teach because there's like a certain level of accountability that comes with that. I forgot what I was going to say.
Look at James.
I just wonder why. Go ahead.
I was going to throw something out there as a reason why I think people try to position themselves in that way. I think of the pleasures that come with like being a king or being the head honcho of a congregation, like everyone coming to you, like getting the special treatment, people serving you, like that sort of thing. You know, it's the Saul versus David thing.
It feel good.
Yeah.
Which could be, if we were really modeling ourselves after, the original or what we're see as the original, like everybody would get that.
Come on.
Yeah.
Everybody would get that. The baby would get that. The senior, everybody. So nobody will be lacking in that.
That's right.
And I think it's a part of this relationship. Attention, is a part of relationship, and so I don't, there's nothing wrong with wanting attention, But then I think we're so looking at today, we're so attention deprived.
We think
that, like we feel like we're so disposable in so many senses. With social media being the way it is, like I can just block you. I can just swipe away from you. I can just go on to the next thing in a split second. And so we're doing more and more to try to generate some type of attention for ourselves so that, because we're like deserts. It's like a desert land. Like nobody's paying me attention for more than a few seconds. You know, which is why listening has become like just almost obsolete. And you know, but everybody, if I was able to, what happens also is that when you get a little attention, you often don't reciprocate it, or it takes a long time because you're so dry and so parched that somebody's now pouring some water on your dried, parched land, but you're not able to, you know, it has to get saturated till the point overflowing to where you're able to do it for somebody else. Right. So then that person who's giving you attention, they're going without. And it's just so off balance and everything, and we're just so attention deprived that, you know, that's why you have this, it's almost like a pandemic, like, you know, a different type. Where me, like, you know, oh my God, you know, and then when somebody gives you a little attention, you just go bananas and you're not able to actually do what you should do with that attention, or what you, I won't say should, but what you could potentially do, like the creative things you could do with giving each other that type of attention. There's so much stuff that we're just, it's like we're going around the mountain over and over doing the same stuff at this point, I feel like, because everybody's wanting the attention that everybody could be getting if we actually took a moment to listen and to, you know, be present with each other.
Come on,
you know?
And when you say that, it reminded me like of the Godhead, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Like they all gave each other attention. They deferred, they served each other. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that is the model for humanity to be healthy and whole, is to not overinflate your position. I mean, they could have easily said the Father is the one that, but they didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like they deferred to each other.
You want to talk about the relationship between husband and wife? You want to get into that?
Oh Lord!
Because even that's in question today. We think women can do men things and men can do women things, but I think it's because we think that leadership means more than, or we think being the head of a household means being more than. But in reality, it means like equal in terms of like sharing value in life. But it's like
and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's
to each other.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle. You know what I'm saying? Like I can only do what I can do until I link up with somebody else who have a different skill set.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make me better or lesser than you, but we fit together to accomplish more. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's true not only in marriage, but like in life. Like we are so much better together.
Yeah.
Like, let me tell you, we have really overinflated. This is my idea or thoughts. We've overinflated this whole human thing because we don't exist as human without the plant and the animal and the air and the water and all that kind of stuff. And so even that, like it's not balanced. It's almost like it's a relationship that we're not feeding properly because it's us.
That's right.
But we don't realize that if I don't feed the earth the way it's supposed to be fed, and take care of it and care for it, if I don't care for each and every thing that I encounter, the tree, the waters, and we see it, and we just keep acting like we are something without it. Like we're some type of separate entity when literally, like, you know, at least according to science, the trees are just doing the reverse thing with the air that we're doing. But we're, you know, they're the lungs of the earth. And then, you know, you have the water is like the blood in the vein. Like everything is just a constant interchanging of just being. But because we have made humans just, we somehow or another think that we exist without this stuff or that we can do without whatever. We don't respect the energy that the nature and life around us has to offer. We don't respect it. And it causes the same type of thing. We think, you know, again, we have this old, we're leaders of the earth, but we're not listening to the earth. We're leaders of the animals, and God gave us dominion. All that's what we say. But we don't listen to what where we're given leadership over. And you can't lead this stuff. We're sitting there killing the whole world. We're killing everything.
It's so much bigger than us, man. Like, even when you realize what I'm neglecting, I'm going to become eventually.
You say something.
Dirt. basically, I'm going back to dirt.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so it behooves me to, like you said, protect the environment because that's going to be me one day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Outside from my spirit, my body is that's what it's made of.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
It's made of the air that I'm breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they say that our body, like, is actually mostly space, but it's water. But if you were to zoom in, like, there's so much space between this what is it, atom and another atom or something like that. Like you wouldn't even be able to see that there's. It's just I don't know how it's like it would almost look like planets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were to zoom out of the planets and you might see a cluster of stars, but if you were to zoom in, you may not see one star from the other.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we're like having this, I can zoom out and I'm seeing this whole body, but if I were to really zoom in, there's so many different things that are contributing to this. And I'm not caring for it. I'm too focused on, I don't know,
Yeah.
a nice suit, a nice car, whatever, or to actually see that there's so many different moving parts that need to be cared for and need to be.
That's the picture of the body of the church.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah, it is. And every single part deserves attention.
Mm-hmm.
At least when it's brought to my attention, I heard, I heard someone say that responsibility, because you have responsibility, right, over the things, certain things, but true responsibility, you have to be able, is the ability to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't actively and accurately respond to something that you're not actively and accurately aware of. And if you're a fluid being and I'm a fluid being, we have to be literally moving together and aware of each other in order for me to be responsible over our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to have that quickness of just presence and awareness to be able to flow with you. Otherwise, I think, that's why leadership is weird to me in that sense. I don't say weird in like a derogatory way. Odd, peculiar.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are so willing to give away all of our energy and power to this one particular individual to lead us somewhere without acknowledging the fact that I have to be present and actively, I'm leading myself in the same way that you're leading me. And I'm leading you, and you're leading me. It's just like a constant, like what you're saying. It's like we're all sharing a whole Godhead or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just constantly interacting and bouncing and sharing different perspectives. And it's like, so the whole idea of just this, it's a little, to me, it's a little off.
Yeah. So we didn't reach our full potential in church.
Oh, what was the whole?
That was the
We were on a
question.
trajectory of climbing that ladder, and we kind of descended, both of us. I'm glad I did, honestly. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't think my life would be as rich and full had I complied with the system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, yeah, I think. So, what would you tell somebody maybe who's contemplating whether or not to, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that, because I don't want people to feel like we're on a mission to disrupt their churches. You know what I'm saying?
But you know what? Okay, that would be the negative side. But if you flip to the positive side, it's like, nobody's on a mission to disrupt anything, but we are on a mission for you to follow truth. And if following truth looks like disrupting a pattern or formula, then that's just for you to kind of, find your way through. But you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes it looks like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes following truth looks like you're just
Yes,
disrupting a pattern of whatever.
Which is what we see with Jesus and the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
They had a system. They had this hierarchy. They had this group, and he came, disrupted all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that they said he was heretical,
Mm-hmm.
and he was blasphemous. He was demon possessed. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying is true, man. Like sometimes truth and the real way seems like it's wrong.
Right. So with that in mind, how would you pose the question that you were gonna? Somebody who now wants to, whatever.
I
How
would
you
say,
advise
yeah,
them?
yeah. So it's like somebody who is in the system, but hears and feels God possibly calling them away from it, but they have fear that if they leave it, they'll cease to be, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, yeah, the people who want you to be this, if you leave the organization, that's pretty much the end of the friendship.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to someone, and we'll close it like this, what would you say to someone who is, I guess, afraid to lose it all?
I don't know if I would say something so much as I would ask questions. Like, really, what is it really that you're afraid of? What do you think you have that you can lose? So if you were to leave that and you lost friends, were these people your friends?
Mm.
What are you really losing, And what are you really afraid of? Are you afraid of being lonely? Are you afraid of being ostracized? Are you afraid of, and then if you're afraid of whatever, then you're able to identify whatever it is that you're afraid of or what you think you're going to lose. Do you really believe that God is calling you to something opposite, that could potentially cause these things to happen? And if so, how important is that versus this? Like these are just questions that you could be asking yourself. Like, if you truly believe, do you believe God is all knowing? Like, just really. I mean, and I think it's okay to be honest. If you don't, just say no. And then you can dig into that question. We want so badly to not look bad in the eyes of God, like as if truth can't see what's going on anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't believe, I don't believe. If I think it's wrong, I think it's wrong. So why do I need to paint it some other way? So I think really being honest with yourself. Do you believe that this God you're praying to is all knowing, all seeing, all powerful, can get you to whatever and do whatever? And if you do really believe that and you get to that point, now this is on one side of the balance, and then the other side of the balance is all the things you think you might lose. And I think you should really just observe that balance, like, all powerful, all knowing, all whatever,
Mm.
all seeing, loving, eternal. I might lose some friends, I might be ostracized from an organization. And even if I was off and I heard wrong, do I believe that this all loving, all eternal, whatever God is just gonna just sit there and shake the head at me?
Mm.
And you know what? You should have listened. Like, I think that a lot of stuff that we've just perpetuated over the years, and not just the past years, with our grandparents, but just this has been building up for
Mm-hmm.
hundreds, if not thousands of years, where we've got to the point now where we're just we're acting, and we're afraid of God and truth and really facing ourselves and all this kind of stuff, to the point where we just,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be valuable to really just question, just lay it all out there,
Yeah.
and and I think that we don't need to have an answer.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If you come with this and you already have the answer,
Yeah.
but question it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I would want people to know, who's considering that question, to know that there's a much larger ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
that Jesus wants us to exist in, that's larger than the local church,
Mm-hmm.
lowercase c.
I'm so glad because I think that lowercase c is really important.
Yeah.
Like, if nobody would take anything out of this, the
Mm-hmm.
lowercase c and the lowercase l is really important to emphasize, because what you're calling the capital C is vast.
Yeah.
It's vast.
Last words?
Yeah, I'll offer a little bit of advice, little that I have. I say seek God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Like, if you feel that God's calling you to do something or bring you out of some place, then God would know. So commit yourself to prayer, commit yourself to fasting, and trust that God will locate you with your tribe for whatever season And if you have a calling, then he'll tell you what your calling is, and he'll be responsible for getting you to the place that you need to be. Nobody else.